girls and Black women. And one of the things that really has struck me over the past few years has been the number of missing girls, especially Black missing girls, and the lack of national media attention around it. According to the latest figures, and according to I have the YouTube channel going at the same time. So according to the latest figures from the FBI's National Crime Information Center database, over 500,000 people were reported missing in 2021. Of those missing, more than 350,000 were children. And from those cases, more than 70,000 were Black girls. How do y'all feel about this? What's your reaction to that statistic?
I will start.
To me,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
To me, it's very disturbing. And especially at this day and time with so much technology and everything going on, you would think that we would not be having this happen, but it is happening. And there's no media press to support or bring awareness to Black females disappearing. And, you know, it's really sad.
I agree that hearing those statistics, that it, like Rita said, it's very disturbing. And I'm wondering that why is that happening? You know, why do we not have the media attention to that? And how many people know about these statistics? Because before you said them, I didn't know about them. So is there a way to put them out there so people are aware that this is happening?
Yeah, Jackie?
I will add to it. I was a part of a small discussion, you know, with a small number of girls, and we were talking about this. And I was really amazed to find out that an area really close to me, someone had been stopped because they had a different license plate from, you know, Tennessee, and they had been stopped really, really close to where I stay. And the police had informed them because they were out of state, you know, cars seemed to be foreign in the area, that this was kind of a major pathway for sex trafficking for young girls. And so just hearing the statistics along with that information that was revealed from that particular discussion, it just really alarmed me, because I think sometimes we are very much in the dark about how this can happen right in our back door. And one of the main things I think that came, because there's so many ways now that sex trafficking is taking place with, you know, Backpage and, you know, apps in so many different ways. But I think one thing that is really heavy on my heart is for us to make sure that we affirm our Black women and our Black girls, because so many of this has been successful, maybe because of, you know, sometimes, not always, but the lack of affirmation that comes. And so these luring things that could, you know, pivot our young Black girls and our Black women from, you know, their families and communities that really care about them. So like Dr. Archin, I didn't know that the statistics were that high, and it's very alarming, but I think it's something that we definitely need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, Lydia, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, just as an aside, and not just affirmation, but information, and making the importance of taking some ownership of this issue. If we are on the telephone, or if we are using our social media platforms to talk about business development, personal finances, talk about other people, like, let's be real, right? So if we're using those modes of communication to talk about other things, then I think that we have to take some onus as well as Black women to say, you know what, yes, let's affirm each other, but also let's share some information, because we should not be shocked by these statistics. We recently, as a part of She's Ready, did a broadcast called Queen Bee, and had some of our local representatives from One Place Family Justice, who deal directly with people who are survivors of trafficking, of human trafficking, and to recognize that even in rural areas, human trafficking is real. that some of the highways that we would never expect. So it's important for us as agency leaders and as just community members to get involved in the conversation in a way that whether we're talking for pleasure or talking for professional reasons, that we are consistently sharing the data and the information that's going to be relevant to our community.
Yeah, let me just 1 second. So, part of the reason why I've even brought this topic up was because a lot of times the conversations about human trafficking and sex work and HIV and all these things, we're operating in domestic violence, right? We're operating in silos and not talking to each other, right? And so if there are 70,000 girls in 1 year that go missing, is that not relevant to us talking about vulnerability to HIV, right? So I just wanted to bring in that point. So Regina, I know you wanted to say something.
I'm not an expert or anything in this, but most of what I know, of course, is being what I do, the little bit that we do see in the media. And every time it happens, we're shocked, but I worked for the federal government for 37 years, and my duties were background investigations. And basically what that taught me is that we need to look at the whole person. A lot of times there's people right in our neighborhoods, there's people in our homes who we don't suspect of doing certain things, but it was during those backgrounds that we did records checks, we did interviews, we did employment checks, education checks that showed the whole person. And my responsibility was to identify red flags. Too often we ignore red flags, and that could have been through any different types of ways. But with this, my gut feeling also tells me when something is not right. And a lot of times we have to just listen to our gut. We want to say something told me or whatever, but listen to your gut, because even if you're wrong, it's better to check something out. So I just believe that we think about our neighborhoods. My sister said something about the neighborhoods, apartments, and where you live, and you know those places well. But too often we don't think about, as a citizen, that we have rights to question things that are going on. And my sister in the beginning mentioned the policemen, they're there to protect and serve, right? So we shouldn't be hesitant when we see something that's not right to contact the police departments. I rode the Metro in DC, and I didn't realize until years later that the Metro is how our children get to school. I grew up rural, yellow school buses, everything, but in DC, they get to school on the Metro. You have government workers, you have agents carrying guns, you have the homeless, you have all these people around. Some of these children, about 5 to 10 years old, traveling by themselves. So those are the types of things that I think is responsible for the government, put up signs, do more watching, more oversight in order to protect our children, because we have to put those systems in place. And even starting at home, telling our children, beware of this. If something doesn't feel right, let us know. So those are my comments.
And I think that it goes back to the old school. Parents encouraging their women, giving them, especially our girls, giving them affirmation. And the media has downplayed women so much, and we need to be careful in what we let our girls, especially, but our children, listen to. Because I have young granddaughters. My oldest granddaughters are 14, and they're being influenced by the music that they hear. But when they come to grandma's house, they can't listen to it. I'm sorry. But it does play a part on their behavior and what they think that they can wear and what they think is acceptable. And I was with my 14-year-old granddaughter yesterday, and she was telling me about things that, her friends in school were doing. And I was like, oh my gosh. But if it's not taught at home that these things are not acceptable and they're getting it from the media, then they think it's okay. But we as older adults and parents and grandparents, we need to encourage our children saying, no, this is not right. Everything that you listen to is not the way that it is. But let's have this conversation. So
can I throw a little wrench in that? So I grew up in a 2-parent household, middle class, went to church. My parents, I didn't listen to all that crazy music, right? But I had someone from church, an older man, who started calling me and started saying, oh, you're pretty. And this was around 13, 14 years old. You're so pretty. You should be a model. Oh, let me take you out. I can teach you how to be a model. I can get you into the modeling agency. Right. So he started calling me, and then it started escalating to talking about sexual topics and things like that. And then I was like, wait, hold on. Why are you asking me these questions? Right. But so did have a red flag that came up, but I'm sure there were other girls at my church who he also did that to. And he ended up going to jail for that. Right. And so I think there's also a need for faith leaders and parents to talk to their children about their bodies and sex and sexuality, so they know when things like that they're like outside of their boundaries, and that they're not okay. Like at a 14-year-old, I thought I was grown, right? I thought I could talk to somebody older, but didn't realize what was happening until luckily nothing happened, but didn't realize what was happening.
But this comes with our youth believing, and because some of them have been taught that ministers and police are people in charge, but not knowing that a lot of it is some of these people that are in charge and that we should respect and look up to are the very ones that are committing these crimes. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a thin line between, okay, yes, this is your minister, but once he crosses this line, then you should say, stop, wait a minute, let me go talk to my parents about it, or talk to someone that they can really trust. And a lot of times now, my daughter says my grandchildren will tell me things that they won't even talk to their parents about. So I built this rapport with them, not unless I think it's something that your parents should know, will I disclose it, because I want them to be able to come to me, to feel like at this age in their life that they will be able to come to me and talk. But, once they get 17, 18, I don't know if that'll still happen, but I pray that it does. But, you have to make that clear understanding. And a lot of these single home parents, sometimes parents don't have time, or their trust isn't there, or they feel like they're bothering their parents. So
I see Jackie and then Dr. Archin.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point about, having both parents was raised in church, and in this particular case, what you're talking about, which are many cases that I'm aware of, I'll say maybe, the predator or the person that approached them was somebody that they trusted. And so as much as you want to create that open door policy for your children, to talk to you, but you also raise them, as she was saying, that, policemen, school teachers, ministers, your youth pastor. These are people that you trust. And I think more and more now, places of faith, because I'm a faith leader, places of faith have to make sure that we are also looking at, background checks, watching suspicious behavior, looking at things in places where we shouldn't have to do that, where people are going to worship God, to have a better understanding of their lives, and, just to further and deepen their relationship with them. But you do have to keep those things, and not just for young children. I mean, even people that prowl on young single women, or, women, period. So it really is a lot. And I think we can't be too careful. I don't think we can over-educate. I don't think we can over get involved. I think, we need all fronts. We need the fronts of the families. We also need, when kids are involved in sports, we need those other parents that are there, that are paying attention, the relationship between the coaches, or, older classmen. We need those who are involved with worship center activities. I just think it's everywhere, because one thing that I was very surprised of, as I mentioned, about knowing that there was a major traffic road right here in my rural area. So you cannot, you just cannot be too careful. And so I don't think I don't think it distinguishes between just single parent home. I think, we all think that we are seeing and that we're watching and that nothing's going to get past us, but you can never be too careful. So I think just going back to that, it takes a village to help, raise a child, but it also takes a village to help watch after one another.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Archin?
Yeah, no, I agree with all the comments so far. And one thing too, I think we have to be cognizant of is the social media, right? A lot of this can happen through social media, and all the kids are connected, right? When I was growing up, we didn't have, at least I didn't have any of that connection that you have with social media. It's midnight or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. These kids are on their phones, connecting through, whoever's out there. How do we protect them? To me, I feel like this is it's very important, but it's very difficult. We cannot take their phones away. We have to give them the freedom, but we also have to find a way to protect them from all the vile stuff that's out there on social media. And how do we do that?
Yeah. And so
if
part
I
of
may,
it is education. I was saying part of it's education. Lydia, go ahead.
no, I beg to differ with Dr. Archin, especially if we are the ones who are paying the bills for those cell phones. I have a 13-year-old son at home, who literally knows when it's time to hand over the phone at night. He does not take that phone into his bedroom. Like, you don't sleep with the phone overnight. If I say, hey, time out, that's what it is. And even if I didn't pay his cell phone bill, we have to, I think it was Ms. McDaniel that said we need to go back to old school. Like, there are some reasons why things worked in the past and that our elders have actually become our elders, because there were some things that have worked that we really have got to go back to, and not thinking that our children have to be our friends, but rather asserting ourselves as the adults in the situation and monitoring what they do. And if you don't want to hand me the phone, then okay, I'll turn the service, I'll keep the phone.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. But I also think that, for every one person who does what you do, you might have like 10 people who don't, right? They let their kids, I don't know.
Yeah. One thing that we had when I was raising, me and my husband were raising my 2 daughters, to me, it was like a ministry of presence. Everywhere we were, and if we were not there, we had other adults there with them. And they knew that they could not get away with what they, when we were not around, they knew they couldn't get away with, because the word would get back to me. And I think a lot of times most times children want boundaries. They want to know that somebody cares where they are. They want to know that somebody cares if somebody's bothering them. I'm not sure if my youngest is on, but she would tell me everything. And it's just like I said, if anybody ever says to you, don't tell your mom, tell your dad, I'm like, you tell us. I said, because there's something wrong with that, especially if it's an adult. But it's, again, like Sister Lydia said, we have to set those boundaries. And I do believe that as they grow, they will know that somebody has laid a foundation for them, saying, okay, this is how far I should or shouldn't go. This doesn't feel right. Let me talk to an adult that I trust, like Sister McDaniel. Have somebody that if your child feel like you can't talk to you, that they know that there's somebody who there is to talk to. My children had extra mothers and fathers in dance ministry, at school, at church, everywhere. They treated them as their own. And the same thing for me with their children as well. And even to this day, we can see how positively that held up. But it's like Sister Jackie said, or Dr. Archin said, for that group of us, there's still groups of everybody else that's not doing that. So how do we get to the people that's not doing that?
So, I want to tie this into kind of the conversation, the Awareness Day that we're commemorating today. And how does this conversation about boundaries and protecting your loved ones, how does that tie into experiences women women have with HIV? Anyone?
Unfortunately, I think so many of us, we experience from childhood, we view that three-letter word sex as a dirty word. And so therefore, it's not until we are well into our adult years that we even start to have girlfriends, that we're having serious conversations about sex. So it really is important that as women and girls, and especially as women, that we're engaging the young women in our lives in real conversations about sex, engaging them, whether it is using a song that you hear them listening to as a teachable moment, or an advertisement that you may see on television. You know, there was a commercial back in the day, I think it might have been for Carl's Jr. or Hardee's, that that used sex to try to sell a burger. You know, there's this idea that sex sells. So if it's an advertisement on television, something that you see online, create that teachable moment and engage in those conversations. And if you have difficulty bridging that, right? Like just birthing the conversation, like, what do you know about sex? Let's work with organizations. Let's find our local organizations like Selma Air. We work with parents all the time and walk them through those conversations. Sometimes we're in the room, sometimes parent comes in or emails or calls, say, hey, Lydia, you got anything I need to talk to my son about, or I need to talk to my daughter about yada, yada, yada. You got anything I can use as a reference? So stepping up to the plate and asking for help, you know, that's the most vulnerable place to be in, is to have to ask for help, but it is the safest place when you recognize that you need it and you need some information that someone else has. So, you know, even though most of us wear this cape with an S, you know, and we have an S on our chest, so we're super women all the time. And unfortunately, we've fallen into, many of us continue to perpetuate this idea of a strong Black woman. But girl, take that cape off and ask the questions. Let's have the real conversations, so that we can go ahead and make sure that our next generation won't have to have the same conversation.
Yeah. Rita?
For me, I never knew anything about HIV until I came to Durham. The conversation about sex at home was a no-go. That's just something my mother did not talk about. And I can remember when I first had my menstrual cycle, she telling me, oh, don't you tell anybody. I'm like, okay, who am I going to tell? But it's like everything else. We need to have those real conversations. You know, like bring the old mothers of the church back, when, you know, a elderly mother in the church would see a young girl with too much lipstick on. Girl, you need to wipe some of that lipstick off. We need to have those same conversations with the young women in church. And for some reason, I'm from the Baptist faith. We just don't have those type of conversations. We can talk about condoms and abstinence, but when it comes down to having real conversations about sex, protecting yourself from sex, we're not having this conversation. And it's just like the panelists before me was saying, you know, we can talk about everything in the world, but it was sex that brought us here in the first place. So this is where we need to start the conversation at, especially before our youth become involved in sex in a healthy way. Now, yeah, sometimes we miss the mark, or you hear young girls and young guys being sexually molested. And even though we may feel like that's the wrong time to have the conversation, but actually it's the right time, because you don't want them growing up and being adults and afraid of sex and having sex for the wrong reasons. When I did a class at the homeless shelter, and we were supposed to be separate classes, but we had to end up having it co-ed. And I did an icebreaker, and it was using your letter of your first name and come out with a sexual word for it. Well, the women were popping it off, but the men were having so much difficulty with it. And so I made the joke. I was like, y'all are the ones who want to have sex, but you all are afraid to put a word with it, to say it verbally, to have that healthy conversation, because we were in a safe space. And this is what we need to do. We need to find safe spaces, have these conversations, not just in our own little cliques. We need to go outside our cliques sometimes and out of our circles and have these safe conversations with, and let people learn to start verbalizing sexual acts and just sexual words, and then deal with the feelings and things that are behind it. So
one of the things that I recognize, and I know was probably for me personally, I come from a generation, and we were definitely in church, and it was always, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And so then when you begin to start having it, as you watch how generations and culture boundaries and all that begin to change, then it's, we go from don't do it to tell me about it. And so that vulnerability from just don't do it, don't get involved with it, to when I really get ready to start being intimate or thinking that I want to have sex, where's that open door to talk to somebody? Because, especially when you come from that, just don't do it, it's a sin, leave it alone, no good thing in it. And although I understand the principle, I know how damaging that can be. So I think sometimes the vulnerability comes from two areas, that as much as now we're trying to create a safe space for especially our young girls to talk about it, there are old stigmas that we're having to do away with, so that this, can really be a conversation that is open. And then I also believe that there is still like a fraction of us as Black women that don't know the whole truth too. So, being able to tell our younger girls, the truth and what we know. And if we don't know it, I think several panelists have said, to find those agencies that do, find someone that is very well diverse in it. If I recognize this, if your religion is don't do it because it's a sin, that is not going to stop them from not doing it. So if you can't have the conversation, get them to someone who can healthily have the conversation with them, because your thoughts of not doing it, it may be the very barrier, or it may be the next opening for the young girl that doesn't have the right information to become HIV positive, because maybe she didn't understand how to have safe sex, or, just beyond the barrier of not doing it, till when she steps into it, she just doesn't have all the right information. So I think the safe spaces, the more the information, I know that technology has created, a lot of misnomers and has a lot of information that is not true, but I think it also affords us an ability to be able to find, some people, even in privacy, maybe they don't have it right there in their reach, but now, I can connect with someone that's in Nashville, just via internet. So that will help me to be able to help my daughter, or, other young girls that are around me, if they don't feel comfortable talking to me, but to know that the conversation has to be had. So if they're not having it with you, they need to have it with someone else, because it will create a major vulnerability that could really be life-changing for them.
So I want to also kind of put some responsibility on our faith leaders, right? Like, how can we better educate our faith leaders about the experiences that make Black women and girls vulnerable to HIV?
I would like to start on that. This may sound a little cruel, but some old things and beliefs need to be retired, or they just need to die. Because in the church, a lot of times people are preaching against what they're doing. And we've seen this where our children have been violated by a person of faith. They've been judged by the people who did the same thing or worse when they were younger. So when you talk about people of faith, true people of faith, they read the Bible and they see people how God sees them, which is through the eyes of love. And I may be the only one, but I have encountered some mean church folks. And that's why we see generations fleeing the church now, because they've been hurt by church folks. They haven't been hurt by the church. They have been hurt by church folk because they've been so mean to them. And Pastor Jamal Bryant said a couple of weeks ago, he said, love never fails, but people fail us. So when the people who join our church, we need to be encouraging them to understand that we are not a perfect church, but we do serve a perfect God. But we still have people who like the religious leaders back in Jesus's day, who think they are better than someone just because they have a title, just because they have a degree. And a lot of times they are using that as a weapon. They're not using that because they've learned to be better leaders in the church. So faith leaders must first rise out of themselves before anyone can better educate them on anything. And they won't care about anything or nothing until all they care about is filling the pews. We're supposed to be, as Christians, we are concerned about the soul as well, but a lot of folks just want to fill the pews and they want to fill the tithing basket. And also we got people of faith who are harboring pain. I think Sister McDaniel said it earlier, they're hurting as well. They're not dealing with their own hurt. They think because they're called by God, they don't need therapy. And a lot of times hurt people, they're going to hurt other people as well. So it's a whole circle of thing that we need to do as faith leaders to make sure that, and nobody's perfect, none of us are perfect, but we strive towards that perfection so that we can help other people, so that people will be encouraged to come and talk to us. And that not fearing that if I send my son or daughter to this church to talk to someone, that they are misusing or abusing them.
Well, and I also want to give you some kudos, because I know that Oikos Institute is working with Black female faith leaders, right, to educate them about how to talk about HIV. And so I think yes, that conversation needs to happen. And also we need to create opportunities for faith leaders to learn, right? And it Absolutely. Be a safe space for them.
Absolutely. And that's a part of our curriculum is the pastoral care and leadership as well. That's part of what we teach as well.
Mm-hmm. Rita?
I think some pastors are afraid to take off their collars and their robes and be human for a second, and to have these conversations, to have these sex conversations, to be able to say the language that's involved in sex without anybody condemning them or them condemning themselves because they feel like they're up here. And so they have a certain standard that they must keep. How do we obtain that? I don't know. I know this is a conversation that I couldn't have with my pastor, but I love my church because I feel like my pastor would judge me. We talked about heart disease and everything else, but to sit down and have a sexual conversation within the church is really taboo. And even though I know there are other affirming churches that support HIV and will have these types of conversation, just my church and my pastor will not. But I can say that my faith is strong, that I still pray, Lord, open their eyes, open these windows for them so that we can be a healing church where people would want to go to, no matter what type of disease that they have. And some pastors even feel like because you have HIV, you were out there sinning and you were doing everything that was wrong. And that's not true for a lot of people. But they just know that HIV has been such a stigmatizing and a dirty word for so long that that's all they know, instead of getting informed about what HIV is, how it's contracted. So when y'all figure out the answer to this, I would like to know. Yeah. So I can take you to my area.
I think it's important for faith leaders to understand how their lack of, or their silence around the topic is hurtful to people, right? Or when they are vocal about it, it's condemning, and that's also hurtful. So how does it feel not having support from churches because you or other individuals are living with HIV?
I cannot speak on that personally, because that I'm thankful to God that has not been my story, but several people that I have had, just the honor of being counseled to, I know how they have walked through it, I think it's very detrimental because faith is something that, especially for us as Black people, it's a very big part of who we are. And to be able to go to God, to seek healing, but then as soon as you get there, there's always, like you said, that stigma of anytime HIV is mentioned, the message automatically goes to the sin that is attached, like no other topic that is raised, but it's a deterrent from people with HIV to going, because you're going to receive healing. Who wants to go to be destroyed? And so I think it has really caused, and I think this is a topic that should be discussed no matter what the denomination or non-denomination is, because it has a great effect upon Black people. Our proportions and our percentages are on the rise. Even like when you look at some of the percentages since COVID has been, I just heard something recently, about one of my Tennessee cities that their statistics for HIV has just risen, in a like ridiculous way when it looked like we were headed down a downslope. And so faith is definitely one of those areas where people will come to look for, just from God, that he can heal, or some type of mechanism or strategy that they could use or help. And so when you go there and you don't find help, you feel lower. It causes people to enter into a deeper level of sickness. Then there's depression. Then their mouths are closed. They won't reach out. So I definitely think that the training for faith leaders is definitely necessary. The healing from it, that is something that needs to be discussed, because our congregations do need, they need more than just, World AIDS Day. We acknowledge this, this is something that happens all the time. And some people are bold enough to come out, but there are other people that are in your congregations that if it's not them, it could be someone that they know. And maybe they are not, just at that point to be able to share. So I always say, just because they're not talking about it doesn't mean that they're not affected by it. And so it's something that we definitely have to realize to be able to change how these things are addressed in our communities.
I think one of the biggest reasons why we have so much stigma in the Black community, but especially in Black faith spaces, is because of our lack of knowledge about HIV, what it is, how people get it, how it affects our community. The fact that Tennessee, the state legislature decided they were not going to take any more federal funding to support HIV services. That just happened a month ago.
Yes.
The rates of HIV are going up in the South, even though they're going down overall in the United States. But I think it's also important for the community to know what the advancements are in HIV work and HIV research. And so that's part of the reason why we have Dr. Nancie Archin on the panel today, because I wanted her to talk about some of her work in helping us to advance and even find a cure for HIV, and especially thinking about how does HIV impact Black women and Black women's bodies. So I want to give Dr. Archin a little bit of time to just talk about some of the work that she's doing.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mathews. So the work I'm doing, as I mentioned before, I'm a basic science. I want to know, as you all know, HIV, there is no cure, right? Once you get the virus, you could go on meds, it'll suppress the disease, the virus, and you can live more or less a normal life. But the minute you stop taking the meds, the virus is going to rebound, and then you're going to have, it can progress to AIDS if you don't go back on your medications. And this happens because you have this reservoir of virus that are hidden in cells. And these cells really are not recognized by the drug that you are taking. So it's basically the virus lies there, latent, sleeping, and the minute you get off your drugs, it comes back up. So the work I'm interested in is I'm trying to find out, can we force this virus to be expressed, to show itself, so that perhaps the immune system can then recognize the cell that has this virus and then kill it. And then we used different types of drugs to try to do that. We also tried to understand how this virus stays inside the cell without being seen by the immune system. Why is this virus hidden inside the cell? And so we do that. So whatever we learn in the laboratory, for instance, if I learn like this protein is controlling this virus, then maybe we can try to target this protein in the clinic to force the virus to express itself so the immune cells can kill it. And then we do small clinical trials, and I concentrate on women because honestly, all the work that has been done in the past in that field, in that space, has been mostly done in men. And then there are excuses that are made, like women, do not want to participate in clinical trials because they have families, they have small veins. There's a list of excuses. But what we are finding is that, for instance, if people know, especially women, if you let them know that there are clinical trials out there, they will participate. If for instance, they have children, you provide childcare. If the clinic is far away, you find a way to pay for their, for an Uber ride or a taxi ride, or you put them in a hotel close by so that you can get the samples from them the next day, things like that. And you should always take into consideration how, for instance, the virus affects women based on age and also based on race, right? Because it might be different. So those are some of the things we are looking at. And I know other studies are also looking at what is the mental health of people with HIV, especially now a lot of people are taking HIV meds and they can live longer. They're going from, being infected when they were during reproductive age, when they could have kids, to living with HIV in their 60s. How does that affect them mentally? So there are clinical trials looking at those types of questions. There are clinical trials wanting to know, why do some women, for instance, tend to, at least there's at least one reported case of a woman spontaneously being cured of HIV. Why does that happen? That seems to happen more in women, which again, could teach us when we include women in our studies, which we are not doing a very good job about it. And that's one of the reasons that I got interested in including women in the studies that I do.
Thank you so much. I
yeah.
think that's huge. Does anybody else have questions for Dr. Archin, who's on the panel?
Yeah, I have one. Your take on it is just so insightful, and I appreciate you for sharing. Yeah. How do you feel about the recent cases of people that have been cured from HIV from stem cell, the whole new stem cell? How do you think that will be vital to women, especially, in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think it's very important. Number one, the fact that you can do that is very exciting, because way back, I remember when I first started doing the cure research back in 2005, it was called the C word, right? Like when we tried to publish a paper on the journal, they wouldn't even accept it because we mentioned the cure word, which was considered a dirty word back then. So we've come a long way. The fact that more and more research is, being done on the cure space and that people are actually talking about it, it's very exciting. And then the fact that you can actually cure people of these stem cell type of approaches. It's very exciting, and I feel like we're learning a lot from it. But I don't think it's something that you can apply to everyone, right? Because number one, a lot of them have like very severe side effects, and they've been done on people who were being treated for cancer, and they just happen to, do this extra step of treatment. So it's not something you could do on everyone, I think. And I think that's why it's important that we find a cure that you can apply, that's applicable to everyone, not just to a few people that you can do that.
Isn't, if the stem cells were used, isn't that a very costly procedure?
It's extremely costly. It's extremely costly, and some of the people who got the treatment had really severe side effects too.
But one of the things that we've also learned, I know you're focused on cure, but I think some of the other interesting things that we've learned about Black women and Black women's bodies is that the HIV prevention medications take longer to protect women than they do men, because the medication takes longer to get to certain parts of the body, the genitals for women than it does for men. And so, that is another reason why it's important.
Yeah. And right. And then the other thing that's coming up too in for many years, women, and this is a very tricky space. Pregnant women are traditionally excluded from studies looking at how, like if when you have a new drug, for instance, it would never be tested on a pregnant person because of concern for the fetus. But are we doing that a disfavor? Are we doing them a disfavor by not including women in that space, pregnant women, for instance? So, there's a lot to be learned, I think. But I think that by the way we can help is to actually participate in the studies when we get a chance to, because it really, really helps make sure that, our voices are heard, and that, we provide some basis to whatever it is that they're trying to determine in these studies, that we're not left out when a cure is found, or we're not left out in a new treatment, for instance, if you have a drug that you only have to take every 3 months, why shouldn't we be part of that, those studies?
So, I think the other things that we've learned about women in research and HIV research is that if a woman is pregnant and is taking their medication and has reached an undetectable viral load, she will not pass on HIV to her baby, right? It's like less than 1% in the United States.
It's very low, but it's still very controversial, because once you get, you will not pass it to your baby, but once you have the baby, you still cannot breastfeed, right? Because and that's a problem. And it's not only, it's a problem culturally too, right? Because certain cultures, you do want to breastfeed, and you have to breastfeed. And if you don't breastfeed, for instance, it's like a dead giveaway that you have HIV. And maybe you do not want to disclose that you have HIV. So, so again, I think the more we can learn, for instance, about, like I was trying to get involved in a study just to look to see if the virus that's detected in breast milk, can it infect your infant if you try to breastfeed? And I think that's very important, because maybe you should be breastfeeding your child if we can show that the virus is not infectious that's found in your breast milk.
Right, because that has implications for the health of the child as well, right? Yeah.
In addition to the mental health of the mom.
Yeah, and a lot of women don't find out they have HIV until they're pregnant, right? And then they have to get tested. So, yeah, Rita.
So my question is, post getting HIV, I learned this past summer that in southern parts of Africa, they offer the PrEP ring. And I was real excited because I was like, oh, wow, women have 3 ways that they can take PrEP. And it's another way for a woman to be taking PrEP and not having to disclose it with the vaginal ring. And then I found out that the vaginal ring will never be offered in the United States, which is really disheartening because, like I said, I was really all gung-ho on promoting and advertising for the PrEP ring. But do you think that it will ever be brought up in clinical trials again? I think it was the efficacy of it just staying in the vaginal area and not spreading throughout the body.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
that why it's not offered in the United States? And
Yeah.
that's just kind of disheartening to
Yeah.
know
I
that.
mean, I think the efficacy was not as high as they thought it was going to be. And that's probably one of the reasons they didn't do additional clinical trials. But I think, again, it's something that might be important to do in different populations, right? Not just one area of the world. And this is something HIV scientist tends to do, and and I'm probably guilty of it too, is just like you try to take whatever you learn from one area and try to apply it broadly across the world. But should we be doing that, or should we have clinical trials? I always feel like the strongest clinical trials are the ones where you have populations in the US, you have in Europe, you have in Africa, you have in South America, you have in the Caribbean, and then you take all that data and you look at it, right? Just to get a taste of everything. So but again,
okay,
yeah.
if I'm understanding right, the vaginal ring protected women from getting HIV, but they stopped promoting it because women weren't using it. Is that what was happening?
They stopped, if I understand correctly, and I haven't read the study, so don't quote me on this. If I understand it correctly, the efficacy was not as high as they expected.
So
In
from
that
the
population anyways, but I don't remember why the efficacy. I don't know if it was because people were not using it correctly or not using it at all. I don't remember.
Okay.
I can send you all the article that goes in more detail, but it was said that it was never used, will never be used in the United States, because I actually went to NCAN and said, look, is there anything that we can do as far as going to the legislators in the House and Senate and promoting the vaginal ring for females? Because, for me, PEP and PrEP are the gateways in preventing women from catching HIV. And so I feel like if there was a chance of women having 3 different ways, which is the pill, the injection, and the vaginal ring, then it would rise the take of African American women taking PrEP, because they would know that they had something that they could take for themselves. It wouldn't be an injection. It's not something that they have to take every day, and they will still be protected. But they said that I had to go through a whole lot more. It was more of a medical problem than, excuse me, because I'm not very acclimated with certain words, but it was a medical issue that had to come to the forefront in order to, before we could long get it to be passed as a bill or something of that nature.
So I just want to catch some of our audience up just in case. I want everybody to understand what we're talking about. So PrEP is an HIV prevention medication that can prevent HIV up to 99% with perfect use. That's with a pill, a daily pill, but now they also have what we call long-acting injectables. It's basically similar to like an insulin shot. You take the injection and it lasts for a month, sometimes 2 months. We may be getting to the point of 3 months with research. And so another option is to have a vaginal ring that would administer that medication and prevent women from getting HIV. So I think it's important also for everybody to understand that, like faith leaders and people in the community, to know that there are ways to prevent HIV, both through condoms and abstinence, but also through medication. And that people who are living with HIV, if they're taking their medication consistently and can reach an undetectable viral load, they will not pass on HIV to their partner, even without a condom. And so, you know, that's information that I think most people in the community don't know. And I do think it's information that can empower us to help destigmatize HIV. You know, because I know another issue, and we don't really have a lot of time to talk. We don't have time to talk about this, but another issue that comes up for women in particular is being in relationships and having to disclose and having to navigate, whether if you have HIV, how to navigate that with your partner, or how to protect yourself from getting HIV. And so having access to these medications is another way to protect yourself, because it's maybe difficult to negotiate using condoms, right? And so just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page when we're having this conversation. So I want to wrap up. We're getting close, and I want to open it up to the questions that have come in the chat. The last question I want to ask to the panel: what advice would you give young women and girls to help prevent them from getting HIV, acquiring HIV, and what advice would you give to those to help those who are living with HIV?
If I could go first, I think we should circle back to the conversation we had about the reason we should be discussing sex with these young women, right? Because we want to discuss sex because we want them to know there is a difference between what I would consider healthy sex and what's unhealthy, right? And by knowing what's healthy sex, it gives you more control over your body, I feel like, because it makes you know what you want, and you know when something is healthy versus what it's not. And I think one way towards HIV prevention is by knowing who you are, what you want. You have control over your body, and you can say no when you need to say no. I think that would go a long way towards, preventing HIV acquisition, when not only do you know when something is healthy, but you also know what you need to do to prevent yourself, from acquiring HIV through sex. And not only HIV too, right? Because another thing we should mention, even with the PrEP, while it may prevent HIV, it's not going to prevent other infectious and acquiring other infectious diseases, right? So you have to make sure that you still use a condom, you know how to protect yourself, and you have a healthy conversation about sex and know what's healthy sex versus what I would consider not healthy.
I like to add, I'm more of speaking to the heart and to the soul, because I know as a young girl growing up in Louisiana in the South, the racism that you have to deal with, and then the pressure, and my parents, they loved us as much as they could, but they didn't know to have these type of conversations with us. And Sister McDaniel said it earlier, you just don't do it. No reason, no anything. So some of the stuff I would say, and I'm hoping that I talk to my daughters as well, is that with the feelings and stuff, you're gonna fall in and out of love a whole lot of times. A lot of times we think that one time we're in love, that's it. Marry this person and we're gonna be together forever. And then you go off to college and you're like, there's somebody else. So just know that you're gonna fall in and out of love a lot. What you have is precious. So don't let anyone make you use your body to prove your love for them. Because, men and women are like buses, here's one, but another one's coming along soon. And follow your passion, because a lot of times when we're passionate about doing something and people press us down, and no matter what, they keep pressing us down, And that makes us not want to talk about anything. We feel like I can do nothing right. But when you have a burning in your heart to do some, a burning to do some, follow that passion and remember that you are the prize. And also just on I can't speak to, I can't not speak to having HIV or AIDS. However, I do get tested regularly. I don't have, I'm partnerless right now, but I still get tested regularly because like Dr. Archin said, sometimes things can be dormant. So if you choose to be sexually active, I would tell the girls, test yourself once or twice a year, just to make sure that you're okay.
Yeah, and I would have to say again, like I would consider if somebody's pressuring you into doing something, having sex, then it's not healthy. And that's what I mean by knowing what's healthy versus what it's not.
In addition to what they said, I would add to make sure that the young woman, as much as you can, understands the value of who she is. You know, there's something about us as women that once we are in relationships, you know, we forget all about the value of who we are, and we're putting everything into, you know, he wants me to do this, or, you know, she wants me to do that, whatever, however the situation is. But you have to know the value of yourself. And so realizing that is the next step that I choose in this relationship that's sexual. Will it be life-changing? You know, and so just to make sure that they are aware that they do have so much control over where their future can go. I always share this sometimes with, you know, young women. You can always be me, but I cannot be you. And so make sure that you take the necessary steps to keep who you are valued, and know that when you're making those choices in intimate relationships, that it has a lot to do with the future, you know, the future that you want for yourself. Because, you know, like what Ms. Thornton said, you know, you may not even be with the person, you know, in the next year or so. And then you're carrying something that you jointly entered into, but now you're carrying it singly. And then I think my statement to people that are living with HIV, I was reading this book with my church. And so this statement was made in this book. And I think you have to know the difference. Guilt will tell you that I made a mistake, but shame tells you that I am a mistake. And so I think so many people living sometimes with HIV don't see that there is hope. And there is hope. We have so many different new medications, and they're continuing to be advanced. You do not have to live in shame. You still have a life that is, you know, so full of purpose. You know, my mantra is live on purpose. Do it. You know, don't consider it to be a life sentence, but look at it as an experience that you then will be able to help and share, you know, with someone else. And so my admonition to anybody that's living with HIV is to live and live fully, because you still have so much more purpose on your life.
Thank you. Lydia?
And I couldn't agree more just on what Jackie just said, because honestly, we've come such a long way from the meds that we used to have in HIV. Remember, there used to be a cocktail of like 7 meds, and then that was down to 3. Now it's down to 1, and now you can have long-active injectables. So, and people are living long lives, you know, relatively normal lives.
Lydia?
I too want to concur with what Ms. Hendricks and Dr. Archin have said around to folks who are thriving beyond their HIV diagnosis. Selma Air was founded 27 years ago, and we literally have clients that we continue to serve who have been with us from day one. So there is hope. So to folks who are thriving beyond that diagnosis, there is hope. There is love. There is compassion. We just have to find our, you know, we all have got to find our folks, regardless of what our diagnosis is, right? Whether it's HIV or whether it's, you know, PTSD or what have you, there is hope. We have to find our folks who are supportive and who are willing to challenge us to be our best selves every single day. The other thing, though, I wanted to address was the idea of what we say to young women, especially little Black girls who are coming of age and questioning And one of the examples that I've used as I've gone into high schools to provide HIV education is to talk to them about who you trust and what you trust them with, right? There is so much value in being a person and in being a female, being a woman. So the example that I give is to ask them to think about emptying the things that we tend to, as a society, value onto a table with this person, this person that you're thinking about engaging in any type of sexual contact with. Would you trust them with your money? Would you put all the cash you have in your purse? Or would you go into your parents' purse and get their money and put it on the table? Would you trust them with your house keys? Is this somebody that you could let into your house and you know that Tyrone, he's not gonna call his homeboys like, listen, come pull up. They got the 80-inch, let's get all the stuff, right? Is this a person that you would trust with your parents' credit cards, blank checks? Is this a person that you would trust with the 9 digits that the United States attaches to your identity, called your social security number? If you cannot trust them with those things, then don't you dare trust them with who you are, with your purpose, with your body, with your future. Because literally you're putting all of that on the line when we trust the wrong people. So, little Black girl, who do you trust and with what do you trust them?
Oh, that's good. I wish somebody had said that to me.
Well, I'm going to say this. I've been living with HIV for 30 years. I just turned 59. And I love life now. I wish I had this statement some years ago, but I didn't have it. And so now I'm living my best life. And I tell anybody, HIV doesn't stop from the minute that you find out your diagnosis, because you can live, you can strive. Life has never been better for me than it is today. And we have to get rid of stigma. It's killing people. I know people who have families that still won't tell their diagnosis, and they've been living with HIV for 20 and 30 years. They'll hide their medications. And this should be addressed as like you have diabetes or catch the flu or whatever. But so many people still tend to hide it. And it's really sad. For that little girl, love yourself before you can love anybody else. I tell my children all the time, it doesn't apply to them now, but do everything that you want in life before you make that move. Because once you cross that line, life gets difficult and it opens up a whole new can of worms. So love yourself first. But thank you. This has been great.
Thank you. I do have one question. I think we addressed a lot of the questions in the chat, but one that we have not talked about is, could you talk about the unique challenges that Black trans women have in terms of accessing HIV prevention and HIV care? Does anybody have any thoughts? Rita, I know you work with Black trans women. Jackie, you go ahead.
Well, I can't say that I have a lot of expertise on it, but definitely from what I understand from several that I do know, the communities are definitely sometimes still stuck with the acceptance of them. And so, it's hard to treat someone that you don't respect. And so it's difficult for some in certain areas, just because of the availability, still with the stigmas and, having to deal with their identities and the crisis. So I do believe that just like HIV treatment for just, Black women, period, that it's also advancing and you're seeing more transparency, in our world about trans women. And so I think that more of them are coming out and definitely helping each other, sometimes just, word of mouth and simple conversation can definitely be a way to connect them with exactly, the right sources that they need. So I think that more things are changing in the world, but I think it probably has been difficult for several in that community to maintain their healthiness. And, a lot of times people have to move away and they have to go other places, so that they can have a peace of mind, and then to be able to have, healing in their bodies for what they need. So I think, just as we're talking about the conversations for faith, I think a lot of that is changing for just that population as well.
Well, it's interesting because while the attitudes are becoming more positive and accepting of trans people and LGBT community, especially in the Black community, we're starting to see all of these laws that are really attacking trans people and especially trans women. I saw a law that was proposed in Florida to take trans children out of the home if their parents are supportive of their trans identity and medical treatment. So, I mean, they're really under attack. And I think that does speak to some of the unique challenges of accessing HIV prevention, right? Is that if you can't even talk to your parents and be safe in your own home, how can you go and access HIV prevention? Any other thoughts?
I'm not an expert on anything, but I warned Dr. Mathews and Demi before I started. I said, if I get too churchy or spiritual, please forgive me or pull my coattail or something. But I believe it was Dr. Cheryl Anderson who did one of the HIV trainings for Wake Forest last fall. And trans people, LGBTQ, I'm sorry if I got that wrong, they're not the problem. The people with the attitudes are the ones that with the problem. What we're doing with the Oikos Institute for Social Impact is we're going into these faith communities and teaching the faith leaders that we have to see people as God see people. All of us, no matter who we are, whether or not we believe in God or whatever, we have a little bit of God in us. The bodies, these bodies that you see is just wrapped around. So that means there's some love in everybody. So what we're doing with the Oikos Institute for Social Impact, we're not going in to save churches. We're not going in to put a roof on your church. We're not even here to help you save souls. We are here to help you reimagine that space that's sitting. Think about during the pandemic, how many of our mega churches and churches were closed. But even now, they're sitting empty for maybe 5 or 6 days a week, and people come back to worship on Sunday. We are teaching them to reimagine that space where we can go out into the community, where we can have these programs, because we know the government is going to beat us down. People talk about the left wing and the right wing, but guess what? It's just one bird. So we can't depend on what the White House is doing. We can't depend on what Congress is doing. We can't depend on what the governor's people are doing. We are here to be anchor institutions in these communities, so that anybody who walks through our door, we will help them meet that need. And again, just to reiterate what we're doing in North Carolina, that's what we're going to help those pastors to reimagine that space, so that if somebody comes in and they need testing, they need training, they need materials, that church will be that safe haven for them to come in and do what they do. And it doesn't matter. People talk, well, I'm not saved, well, I never went to church. Fine, that you're who Jesus reached. Jesus said that we will always have people among us that are not like us. And so what we have to understand is that's what we are teaching now, because what we did before, what got us here ain't going to get us to the next phase. We have all these pastors, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. But as soon as you bring something new to their door, it's like, oh, we can't do that. But you want to reimagine, but you want to do something different. You want to bring the young adults back to the church, but you're unwilling to use this space that's sitting empty for 6 days a week in order to bring that into. So we are teaching people throughout the United States, where we have the different cohorts, that there's a lot you can do with these. We could do affordable housing, we can do before and after care, we can do elder care, address food insecurities. There's lots of things to be done, but that mindset of the leadership is what's got to be changed.
Yeah. thank you so much, everybody, for joining this amazing panel. We've learned a lot. We've gone from so many different topics, and I know we could have talked for hours more, but we just appreciate the work that you're doing to address HIV stigma, to advance science around HIV for women, to minister to people, and to raise awareness about this topic. This is one of many webinars that we will be hosting through the Faith Coordinating Center and as a part of the Black Faith and HIV initiative. We encourage you all to visit our website, blackfaith.org, and follow us on social media, Black Faith and HIV on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And part of the benefit of joining our network is that you get access to the funding opportunities that we have available, the opportunities for speaking, the workshops and the conferences, the in-person events that we'll be hosting throughout this coming year. So we really encourage you all to visit blackfaith.org, join our listserv. We do have some funding opportunities that will be that are now open and available for you to apply. So we encourage people to apply for those funding opportunities by going to gileadcompass.com. The applications are due May 8th. So get to it. And please also do not forget to take our exit survey before leaving. All of the data that we're able to collect from your surveys helps us to keep this programming going and to make sure that we're all funded and happy. So thank you again, everyone, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
I just should mention briefly, I posted something on the chat from the WHO saying that it looks like, going back to the ring again, it's because the efficacy was only about 35%, but it is recommended for extreme cases where people are at risk for acquiring HIV.
Thank you so much.
All right.